5 ways to boost your wealth 5 years from retirement. Retirement planning is vital, and the final years, it's a bit like landing a plane. You can't just go from 40,000 feet to being landed at the airport. You've got to do this staged descent into retirement, and in the final 5 years, you've got to get a lot of things right. So you've got to have the correct amount of money, you've got to have them in the correct vehicles. So whether it's a pension or an ISA, you've got to have the correct mix of assets. So that's like risk on assets like equities and risk off assets such as bonds or money market funds. And the net result of all this is that you're looking to lower your tax bills both while you're working and in the retirement years. So watch this video and you'll get 5 great tips. I'm Ian Shadrack. I'm a financial coach and qualified accountant. I've set up this channel as most people don't need a financial advisor to live the life they want, but a coach can greatly assist them in achieving their goals. You can connect with me via my website or via LinkedIn. I'll put links in the description. In the final 5 years before retirement, key thing to sort out is your company pension. You want to maximize the employer match. That's where when you put in an extra 1%, the employer also puts in an extra 1%, but there's a limit to this. You need to make sure you're selecting the correct funds that are available for your workplace pension. You should consider consolidating past pensions, as this could reduce costs and it could simplify your assets. If your employer's workplace pension isn't that great in terms of the offerings, you can make a partial transfer into a pension of your own choice. And ideally, what we're looking to do here is to maximize pension contributions that are attached to a 40% tax refund. So if you have a mortgage for the final 5 years before retirement, you need to consider whether you want to prioritize paying off the mortgage or paying money into your pension. And it's difficult to give the correct answer because it depends on attitude to risk, and we don't know if or when interest rates will fall. If you've got a small mortgage, it should be quite easy to pay it off with tax-free cash from a pension. But a large interest-only mortgage is like the albatross in the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. It's a burden that's difficult to escape, and it can end up plaguing you for many years. Stock markets favor long-term investment. An average stock market returns will have a greater chance of beating a mortgage over a 10-year plus time horizon. And if you're building up pensions at the same time you've got a mortgage, then it's kind of like endowments revisited, and hopefully we all remember what happened to those. You need to consider the balance of assets between pensions and ISAs. So ISAs are great if you want to retire before the age of 57, because then you need what's called an ISA bridge to make sure you've got enough money until you are able to access your pensions. But it could be that you end up with too much money in your ISAs and you could have been better off getting some tax credits from pensions. So you just need to consider the balance between these two assets, and you need to also remember that tax-free cash is a strategic asset, and through having a lifetime financial plan you can work out what's best for you. You also want to maximize your spouse's pension. So for example, if you both want to retire at 57, you've got 10 years before the state pension, and your spouse can live off £16,670 of pension income tax-free, but they need to have enough money in their pension in the first place for this to be able to happen. So ideally, you might divert some of your contributions, if they're only getting a 20% tax credit, into those of your spouse, so that between you, you're optimizing your pensions with respect to their tax status. You should look to optimize your retirement planning around an ideal amount of money to spend in retirement. The website retirementlivingstandards.org says that for a couple to live a comfortable lifestyle in retirement, they need £54,500, provided they live outside of London. I think this is an assumption of no mortgage, and you do need to remember that you're unlikely to spend that much money in your 80s. They have some guidelines as to what it means, replacing kitchen, bathroom 10 to 15 years, spending £238 a week on food. That sounds a bit low, but anyway, running 2 cars, yeah, replacing one every 5 years, maybe 3 weeks in Europe every year. I think people do more holidays than that, up to £1,300 each on clothes, £56 for a birthday present. Well, I'd say don't join my family because you won't get £56 from me. When it comes to retirement planning, there are free websites available. These are a good starting point to sense check where you are on your journey towards retirement. They're useful if you're under 40, and they're also useful if you're never likely to pay the 40% tax band, because most of these websites ignore taxes and they're generally a bit too simplistic to cover all of the complexities that might arise from your financial situation. There's also, of course, the risk that the website ceases to exist after a while. You could use a chartered wealth planner, but they will generally only tell you the price of their services after you've filled in all your financial information and you've already invested time and effort. They charge around £1,500, often depending on how wealthy you are. Some of them will give you a PDF document specifying what's going on, but this is soon out of date and you've got to pay again if you want to rerun your data. They're more useful if you have a lot of income or wealth or complicated finances. So as you can see here, for this person, £1,500 for just a few variables being dumped into a website isn't necessarily good value for money for him. You can use paid software like Voyant, but if you stop paying, you lose access to your data and the costs mount up over time. The software is a black box. You can't dive into the calculations to see why things are the way they are. It's also not 100% customizable, and particularly around things like flexible access drawdown, it can be a bit lacking. So here we've got a graph of how someone's taking their income over time. The problem is that because they're using UF Plus and they're taking from their pension last, by the time they hit 90, they've still got tax-free cash left within their pension. So they could have either spent more money or paid less tax before that date. So unless you can clearly see that within the modeling that you're doing, you could easily make mistakes with your money in retirement. So here we have another issue that needs to be easily visualized within a retirement calculator. The spouse has run out of ISA and pension assets, so the whole of the 54,500 that is being spent in retirement needs to come from just one person. This triggers the 40% tax band and needs to be easily visualized so you can see what's going on and you can see whether or not there's enough assets balanced between the two people to get the optimal financial plan for retirement. Retirement planning should have many benefits. One would be visualizing your financial future and getting peace of mind around your retirement plans. And another key benefit is the whole tax planning element, where what you're paying for the wealth planning should be saved in terms of lower tax bills in the future. And it's that that's really driving whether you can afford to go to a chartered wealth planner, whether you should use a financial coach, whether you can just rough it through a GP website. My solution to retirement planning is a Google Sheet. So you have to be fairly comfortable with spreadsheets, but there is a read-only version with some formulas removed that I do have available, and you can look at that to see how the whole thing works. I find it interesting to look at case study videos as these show how a retirement calculator can work for you. I've got a playlist based around this. I'm also highlighting a specific video that you might find useful.